Good evening, everyone. We may be close to an answer tonight to one of the most concerning questions among those who have suffered the ravages of COVID-19. If you've had the coronavirus and recovered, can you get it again or even give it to others? Tonight, research out of South Korea, one of the countries most successful in fighting the virus, indicates the answer to both questions is no. The findings also shedding light on the question of immunity. It's where we start tonight with NBC's Tom Costello.
It's the kind of good news development that researchers have been hoping for. Preliminary findings from the South Korean Centers for Disease Control suggest patients who recovered from COVID-19 but then tested positive for the virus again were not infectious and were not spreading the virus to others. 447 South Koreans tested positive a second time, but those virus traces appeared to be dead, not alive. Could it be an indication of immunity?
I think it's a little too soon to take that and say that we know for sure that people have immunity, but we have seen that people do mount a pretty good immune response to this, and we haven't yet seen reinfection. So I think taken together, that is encouraging.
It felt like what I thought was one of the worst flus I had ever had.
Back in early February, Erin Kirk Evans, her kids and husband, all became very sick. Now, after recently testing positive for the antibodies, she knows it was COVID-19, which means she could have some protection.
It just felt like this empowering feeling that I can no longer live in the fear of it and the uncertainty of what it's going to do to my body or my kids or my husband.
In South Korea, the findings have convinced health experts to loosen some quarantine restrictions. NBC's Kelly Kobiea is in Seoul.
They're greeting this new report here with optimism. It means officials will no longer require recovered COVID patients to test negative before being released from quarantine. And it comes just as high school seniors are headed back to school for the first time in weeks.
And it could be critical in hard-hit U.S. states since early testing suggests 1 in 5 New Yorkers has antibodies for COVID-19, but many never knew they were sick. Having the antibodies does not automatically mean immunity, but the South Korean report is further evidence that people who have recovered and do have antibodies may be able to return to work without fear of infecting others. Lester?
All right, Tom Costello tonight. Tom, thank you. Another child has died from that inflammatory syndrome that hits some children after COVID infections. Though rare, almost half the states are now reporting cases, and the CDC briefed doctors today on what treatments are working to save young lives. Here's Kristen Dahlgren.
Dariana Dyson was just 15 when she started complaining about stomach pain and a rash.
It happened so fast. I never thought that taking my daughter in the hospital for stomach pain, I wouldn't be walking out of there with her.
Within days, the Baltimore teen was dead, the latest victim of the newly discovered multi-system inflammatory syndrome. Dariana had tested positive for COVID antibodies.
I hope that can save another child. People need to really understand that this kills people.
Today, the CDC held a briefing call with doctors on what it's learning about the illness, now found in at least 24 states and 9 countries around the world. Cases seem to be peaking about a month behind COVID-19. Many of the children didn't know they had coronavirus, suggesting the illness comes from an overactive immune response. In New York City alone, there are now 147 cases.
I think that's the tip of the iceberg.
Long Island's Cohen's Children's Medical Center saw many of the early cases. Almost 80% had no underlying condition. Nearly all had gastrointestinal symptoms. And the hospital saw success with a plasma product called IVIG, which helps calm an overactive immune response. It's one of the things doctors in Louisiana used on 12-year-old Juliet Daly, who went into cardiac arrest before responding to treatment. She's now out of the hospital, and at her latest checkup showed no signs of permanent heart damage.
They're saying that it looks pretty normal.
She came in, really near death. And within a matter of days, we were able to get her off the ventilator, breathing on her own. It was one of those moments that you really want to celebrate.
Hope tonight.
I'm just so happy that she has a bright future.
That treatments can work if doctors can catch it in time. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News, New York.
Under intense criticism, President Trump today defended his decision to take hydroxychloroquine, brushing aside potentially serious side effects. Kristen Welker has late details.
Tonight, President Trump increasingly defiant about his decision to take the controversial anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine, despite no evidence yet that it prevents coronavirus.
I think it gives you an additional level of safety, but you can ask many doctors are in favor of it. Many frontline workers won't go there unless they have the hydroxy.
A point he doubled down on later in the day.
Hydroxychloroquine is used by thousands and thousands of frontline workers.
But the country's largest medical association says it is not aware of any data showing frontline workers are taking the drug. The FDA has warned against using hydroxychloroquine outside of a hospital setting due to a risk of serious heart problems and in some cases even death. And similar findings in another study funded by the University of Virginia and the NIH, which used data from patients at veterans medical centers, a study which the president attacked today.
They were giving it to people that were in very bad shape. They were very old, almost dead. It was a Trump enemy statement.
The president's stunning revelation Monday surprised even some of his own top advisors.
I happen to be taking it.
Hydroxychloroquine?
I'm taking it, hydroxychloroquine.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi reacting.
I would rather he not be taking something that has not been approved by the scientists, especially in his age group and in his, shall we say, weight group, what is morbidly obese, they say.
Sparking a bitter back and forth today.
Oh, I don't respond to her. I think she's a waste of time. Pelosi is a sick woman. She's got a lot of problems, a lot of mental problems.
I didn't know that he would be so sensitive. He's always talking about other people's avoirdupois, their weight, their pounds. His words weigh a ton.
And the president revealing he started to take the drug after one of his staffers tested positive for the virus.
A very nice young gentleman, he tested positive.
Meantime, the vice president, whose press secretary tested positive, said he is not taking hydroxychloroquine.
My physician has not recommended that, but I wouldn't hesitate to take the counsel of my doctor, or any American should do likewise.
NBC's Dr. John Torres.
Don't listen to other people when they tell you to take medicines like this because, again, the benefit might not be there, but the harm certainly could.
And in a statement tonight, the FDA reiterated the decision to take any drug is ultimately one between a patient and their doctor. Lester.
Kristen Welker at the White House, thank you. The governor of New Jersey said today officials are wargaming what a return to school might look like next fall, whether to reopen, how to reopen, some of the toughest decisions facing states, and parents are understandably nervous. Here's Gabe Gutierrez.
Griselle Cardona is a single mom in the Bronx, and she's worried.
It's stressful. There's times where I found myself having to close myself in the bathroom and cry. I feel like I'm living in a whole nightmare.
When the pandemic hit, she quit her job to take care of her 3 kids. 2 have special needs. For her, it's critical whether New York schools reopen this fall.
What we're worried about, especially parents of students with disabilities, is regression.
Across the country, the future of K-12 education is up in the air, especially with new reports out of France, where dozens of new coronavirus cases have been linked to possible classroom exposure shortly after schools there reopen. Should schools reopen this fall?
I think they should make an attempt to reopen schools, but this is all going to be dependent upon what happens in the summer and what September looks like.
School districts in Minnesota and Texas will be allowed to reopen for in-person classes this summer. Kansas is planning to restart them in August. Katrina Pickens has been taking care of her 3 kids at home there.
It's just very hard to put them into a schedule at home, where there's all these other distractions.
Some states are considering whether to start the fall semester early to catch kids up. One Maryland lawmaker is floating the idea of year-round schooling. Many districts are scrambling to answer unprecedented questions.
How do you socially distance on a bus? What's it look like in gym class? What's a choir room look like?
Hopefully not like this, say New York City authorities. This Brooklyn yeshiva has now been shut down after ignoring social distancing orders. Also today, New York City announced plans for virtual summer school. About 1 in 6 students are being asked to take more online classes because many have fallen behind. Lester.
Gabe Gutierrez this evening. Thanks. Tonight, Mexico is also reopening, many getting back to work there, even with growing questions about whether the COVID-19 crisis there is far more serious than authorities are letting on. Richard Engel is there.
Mexico City is the perfect COVID breeding ground. Overcrowded, with a healthcare system already overburdened. This week, the government began reopening many businesses, but with about half the population in poverty, for many, stopping work was never an option. Today, I went to Mexico City's De Abasto market, the COVID epicenter. Guards check temperature. Many people inside are wearing masks, but with 500,000 people buying and selling here every day, social distancing is impossible. This market has never shut, and people told me it can't. It's the city's heart, soul, stomach, and wallet. Lorenzo works here 7 days a week to feed his wife and 3 children. I asked him if he's worried about the virus. Yes, but fear is better than hunger, he said. But for thousands, the forced gamble with the virus does not end well. Officially, around 1,300 people have died from COVID in Mexico City, but critics say the real number could be 3 times that. And in Brazil, the undercounting may be even higher. NBC's Bill Neely is there.
Coronavirus is spreading faster here than anywhere on Earth. But health officials believe the true number of infections could be worse, perhaps 15 times worse than the official figures.
Back in Mexico, the president says reopening guidelines are recommendations. Regions ultimately decide.
Intervenir.
It's an acknowledgement, as many supporters say, that this country must work to survive. Even as coffins are now wrapped in plastic and graves dug in waiting rows.
It's hard to know the full scale of the problem here because Mexico does very little testing.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.